Just the switch on the mic. Everything else should be good.
Yes. That is, no, that is 2 pages. Yeah. Well, it's a couple of copies.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello.
Welcome to Acts of Change Cultural Institute, located at 3200 South Lancaster Road. I want to welcome you to Acts of Change with a bit of history of Acts of Change. I want you all to know that this space is a very sacred space. It is an institution, and unfortunately, in the African communities, we don't have many institutions that belong to us. But Acts of Change is one institution that belongs to us, and it is an institution that serves the interests of the people in the community. People have the capability of utilizing this facility for events as such, cultural activities. We have programs like Freedom Fridays where we use films to politically and culturally and socially educate people. There's a theater in the back. So it's a very important place that we have here. So again, welcome to Acts of Change. Acts of Change was founded by Baba Eshudeli Fagbenro. He is pictured on this tree here, and he's pictured at the very top. He just recently transitioned in July of this year. And so for many of us, it's a very emotional matter when we step foot in the Acts of Change because it always brings us to who he is. This building, this citadel is a representation of his body. So it's very sacred to us, and we thank him for his contributions and bringing it into existence for our use. So thank you, Baba Eshudeli. Today we are here because we want and we know that it's necessary. Many of us as political activists, or those of us who are interested in knowing and are concerned about issues that face us the world over. We're here to collectively understand these things. We will have discussions on police brutality, environmental injustice, from police brutality to fracking, to whatever is in your heart and mind that you think is an issue that we as a people have to collectively come together to understand. And again, police brutality is one of the major concerns. We also would like to talk about, again, environmental injustice and economic injustice, how these things concern us, our roles and our responsibilities in responding to them and eradicating them altogether. And so there's going to be different topics tonight. It is my hopes that your attention will be turned to these matters. Your fullest attention will be turned to these matters because a lot of people have put in a lot of work, time, and effort to bring this together. And though it may not be many people, but it is quality in the ones that are here. If we put forth the effort, we have potential to solve our problems collectively. So on the panel to help us answer and understand these problems and deal with some of these issues, we have a variety of people who have traveled and made contributions throughout their lifetime to these very situations. And what they represent here is never giving up. Because like I said, many of them have made great contributions for years and years and years, but they have never deterred from their goals and their objectives. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Safisha. Dr. Safisha, along with Baba Eshudeli, is the founder of Acts of Change, which I already introduced. But Dr. Safisha, she has put so much work into this institution. And she is also a professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. She is a professor in Black Studies, and she has the capability to know and understand and put forth effort to help us solve our problems. And she has never, again, like I said, wavered from that responsibility. She has been very consistent. And so we thank her for being on the panel at the last minute. She come to open the doors for us. However, she's sitting as a panelist because another panelist had good reasons for not being able to make it tonight. So we thank Dr. Safisha and for her contributing to this panel tonight and opening the doors. Next to Dr. Safisha is Olinka Green. Olinka is a very dear friend of mine. I've been on her since I was a child. And Olinka has done a lot of work. She has done a lot of work. And the thing about it is, like, she does it all with a smile, and she adds flavor and life and so much greatness to making horrible situations laughable and bringing people to an understanding that it's okay, we're going to move forward no matter what the road we travel may be, how difficult it may be. She's always been that person who is like the gatherer of all and a protector of all in any circumstances, whether it's caring for a child or having people who are down on their luck at a particular time in their life, opening her door to them on an individual basis, to being out in the field on the front lines with the new Black Panther Party, with myself, wherever she is there and she's ready to work. Many of you may know that Olinka is just recently recognized as one of the 10 brilliant Dallas women by the Observer just a couple of last month or so.
Yay!
So that's very important to us because a lot of times our stories do not get told. And these stories that unfortunately don't get told enough are stories that need to be heard quite often. So when people know and understand that this woman who just this year particularly had been arrested and brutalized by the Dallas police and had charges brought up against her that were completely outrageous and false and absurd, you know, this woman prevailed from those hands of tyranny. She prevailed, and not only that, but she continued to bring out a lot of things that people don't recognize. Like, for instance, that particular case, Olinka, she has like a rod in her back, and when she was manhandled in the worst way by these authorities, you know, it was a contradiction because the point that she brought out was not only was she a Black woman, but she was also a woman who dealt with a disability. And on a regular basis, people with disabilities get handled inappropriately. But it's something that a lot of people don't address or see or understand or even know to even think about it. Also, people with mental issues. You know, so her struggle and her ordeal that she had to undergo, it opened up the floodgates for us to analyze these things in a more critical way. And it was one that we appreciate her being able to tell her story about. She may not have wanted everybody to know her physical conditions, but she understood that it wasn't just about her. So we appreciate her because that's the type of individual she is. And I know without a doubt that she will forever be on the front lines as long as it's necessary. So we thank you for being on the panel and making your contributions tonight. The next person that I would like to introduce is this sexy lady. She's so sexy. Her name is Jill Stein. This is my very first time meeting her. But my initial seeing her was a vibrance that I really appreciate. I don't know if y'all see it, but she's very vibrant, and I like that. But Jill, she is, hey, Alice. But she is running for our 2016 presidential elections here in the United States of America. She is on the Green Party. She's running as a candidate. And Jill, she's a doctor. She's a mother. She's many things, just like the other women on the panel and like the women in the room. She practiced medicine, but she has found herself, on the front lines using avenues of education, campaigns, and particularly this election to fight against all the injustices that we talk about, that we will talk about tonight. You don't see quite often when we think of presidential elections here in North America, you don't see people in their platforms addressing those issues unless it's just slammed against their head. Police brutality, hey, I'm going to talk about that as part of my platform, or in poverty, impoverishment. What are some of the other things that we talk about? Racial injustice, institutional racism. All of these things are a part of her platform. Dealing with corruption in the corporations and how they relate to these presidential elections. Bringing out all these hard line issues that a lot of people try to sweep under the rug and have other people not deal with. They give you something to keep you occupied and keep some smoke streams running, but she wants to clear it. She wants to clear it because she knows and understands that it is necessary and we must address the real issues that are there. And it's not popular at all. And she knows that it's not popular, but it has been something that she has been strong with her bullhorn, and other women and other men and people just like ourselves who share these same sentiments. And we truly know that there's a lot of things that have to really be brought to the surface. And she's addressing them through her campaign. I think it's very important that we take a look at who she is tonight. We also have literature on the table, but get to know her and push for an individual as Jill. Push Jill Stein in this upcoming elections. Make her present. Make the world see her and know who she is. Understand her platform. These things are very critical to us because it could change the course of history. But the people are the makers of history, so without you, it wouldn't be possible. So let us understand her platforms, and we'll get to know her a little bit better, and she'll be able to talk about some of these things that we're going to talk about tonight. So thank you so much for being here. Thanks for always being an advocate in every way, with the Green Planet and all of that, environmental concerns, everything that is necessary. Thank you so much for your contributions thus far, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Next to Jill is also a person who I had the pleasure of meeting very briefly tonight. He's a young man who is very active in the Black Lives Matter movement. I can say, and with great contradiction, that I don't know much about the Black Lives Matter movement. So I was happy to meet you tonight, and I look forward to what you will share on its behalf and your work, because I am wanting to learn more. And I say that to say also that you in the audience, please make sure that your mind is ready and open to ask questions, have great, true dialogue. We want this to be your platform too. So If you don't understand something, want to know something in depth, we're going to definitely open the floor for you to be able to do so. But this young man, he is also in the music industry, and he uses his music and talents to educate people, here in the Dallas area. And so I look forward to meeting and hearing more from him tonight. Now I'm going to read his bio because, like I said, I don't really know too much about him. It's my first time. But just let me read to you a little bit about Jarvis Wright. He is a local from Dallas. You were born here in Dallas?
Yes.
Born in Dallas. And he is also an ambassador and a label spokesman for We Make Music Incorporated, correct?
We make real music.
We make real music. We make real music.
Wow.
We Make Real Music Incorporated, and we will learn more about that. We will learn more about that tonight. And he is also active in We Make Mentors.
We make real music.
We make real mentors. We make real mentors. And that's a branch of that record label. So what it is that we use the music and then we create community projects and different things like that serve the communities. That's excellent. He also serves as a motivational speaker and a mentor for his community in all areas. And he is, again, as I mentioned, a grassroots activist in Black Lives Matter. So I think it's very important that we get to, and I want to make, if I forget something, let me know, because I do want to bring out the fact that the music may be a tool to do the things we need to do. So I want to make sure that we hit on that tonight. So these are our 4 panelists tonight. So you can give them a round of applause and just thank them for being here and taking the time. What we're going to do now is we're going to open up the floor for the panelists to give a couple of minutes on their stance on a couple of the issues that I present to them. Each of the panelists have at least 10 minutes. And in this 10 minutes, I also want for you to incorporate the work that you are doing that addresses these issues, because those are the things that we need to hear. A lot of people want to know how they can help. Is that right, Gary? How they can be more involved. What can they do? And you are responsible to give them answers to things that are a concern to them. So we want to be able to do that tonight. And so there's a list of things that we want to address. The main thing is police brutality in our communities. Police brutality. Let me see. We want to also talk about environmental injustice. I have a list of things here. We want to talk about the Paris climate change talks that are currently happening internationally. We want to know and understand environmental issues. Jill, I know that's a major concern for you. I want you to pull out key points that you think are necessary for people to hear on those things. We also want to talk about this recent Texas legislator signed House Bill 40, and it prohibited local jurisdictions from banning hydraulic fracturing. Is that correct? Fracking is this issue here. That's another thing that we wanted to pull out, correct, Gary? So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about and mention some names of people who have been killed by authorities here in Dallas and examine these things. Where are we now with police brutality when we look at and examine the case of Clinton Allen, Jason Harrison, Andrew Gonyer, Cedric Stevens, and Tobias Mackey? We want to reflect upon all the lives that have been lost. What does it mean to us now in our address and fight against police brutality? Where do we go? What do we do? Those are some questions that people in the audience may have and want to really know. What do we do? How do we address this issue? Militarization of the people in the communities, So Olinka, Dr. Safisha, I want to know what your thoughts on some of these things that I mentioned. Let me see if there's anything else that we need to talk about. There was recently some arrests this morning in Baltimore with the occupying of the city hall. This is a means and a strategy for local activists, to address police brutality and things like that. They wanted to occupy the city hall. Is that effective? Is it not effective? Let's discuss, what do you think about it? As an organizer, as an activist, what is the most effective way to organize? What tools do we need to use? How do we need to use them? So I have a ton of other questions and different things like that, but my questions aren't as important as the audience's. So y'all formulate those questions and thoughts and ideas in your head so you can ask them when the time permits itself. So I just wanted to highlight those talking points, and I will allow the panelists to reflect on them, and they can start where they like with those talking points that are most interesting to them. So if y'all unite with that, that's what we'll do. Y'all good?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, again, I don't want to be a stickler with the time thing, but I do have to be a little bit, but not. I don't want to be aggressive. But I will permit you at least, I would say 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, or something like that, to make a statement, an opening statement on those issues and things that I pulled out. And I will start from this end to this end. I don't want to say right to left because I really don't know which one is which. So from that end to here. Okay? So we'll start with you, Jarvis.
Good evening, everyone. Once again, my name is Jarvis Wright. I just want to thank Anika Green for inviting me and allowing me to sit on this esteemed panel with great individuals. As she stated, I'm part of a local record label here in Dallas called We Make Real Music. We have a branch called We Make Real Mentors, and in that branch, we go to schools and we mentor kids and we support administration. We do community efforts. We also go and we feed the homeless, and we go into the community and we clean up the community. It is our position that music reaches the masses. Music reaches the masses. Music reaches the community. So we use that as a tool to do just that. We use our influence to bring attention to causes that affect the community. And I take great pleasure in doing so. I've been a grassroots activist here in Dallas for 2 years now, ever since the untimely death of Trayvon Martin. It actually awoke the activist in me, and I've been very passionate with my efforts. At the tender age of 18, I was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for a drug charge. I had approximately 36 grams of cocaine base, known as crack cocaine. My sentencing guideline was 30 years to life. I killed nobody. But yet I was in cells with murderers that, were facing less time than me. I'm like, wow, how can that be? So during my prison stint, I ended up doing 13 and a half years on a 20-year bid because over time, sentence reform took place. And they really wanted, due to overcrowding, they wanted to get low-level drug offenders, low-level nonviolent drug offenders like myself. They wanted to get us out, which is a good thing. So in 2008, I was released after 13 and a half years. And to say that my transition to where I'm at was easy is a lie. I had a lot of doors closed in my face, a lot of them. Yet my desire to prove everybody wrong were far greater than those denials that I experienced. I refused to lose because I felt like 13 and a half years had been taken from me. So I had a lot to prove. So I would not take no for an answer. I refused to. A topic that I was given to elaborate on tonight is mass incarceration, because I feel like I am a victim of mass incarceration due to prison for profit. Due to prison for profit, I understand now what it's all about. It's all about bodies in jail cells to generate millions for practically people who really don't give a crap about us. And as I sit here, and if you notice the shirt that I have on, it says all Black Lives Matter. And I done this purposefully because the public has the erroneous perception that if you are a felon, your life doesn't matter. And that is so wrong. That is so incorrect. That is so incorrect. I paid my dues. I paid my debt to society while I came out with a clean slate. I expect that from the public. I expect a fair chance. I expect a clean slate. Even with the X on my back, I expect that. So we asked the question, what is mass incarceration? I looked to Michelle Alexander for this answer. According to Michelle Alexander, it is the new Jim Crow. Alexander claims the U.S. criminal justice system uses the war on drugs as a primary tool for enforcing traditional and new modes of discrimination and repression. The new modes have led to not only the highest rate of incarceration in the world, but also an even greater imprisonment of African American men. The United States will imprison 1/3 of its African American population. Whites are more likely to commit drug crimes than people of color, yet there are more African American men in prison than their white counterparts. The culmination of this social control is what Alexander calls a racist case system, a type of stratification wherein African Americans are kept in an inferior position. Alexander posed the question, where have all our black men gone? I will tell you, they're in jail. They're in jail, I assure you of that. There are black men in jail that were enslaved in the 1850s. The U.S. leads the world in mass incarceration, 2.4 million behind bars. That's a 500% increase over the past 30 years. The U.S. incarceration rate is 4 times that of the UK and six times that of Canada. It has 5% of the world population, but 25% of the prison population, and 60% are persons of color. 1 in 8 black men will be found in prison on any day before the age of 25. 3/4 of African Americans are in prison for a drug offense. Since the start of the war on drugs, more than 500,000 people have been jailed due to a minor drug offense, I being one of them. In 2008, 37% of black high school dropouts were incarcerated. 37.2% of black men 20 to 34 with less than a diploma are incarcerated. I was one of them. 90% of those being held in prisons are men. The incarceration of black men is 6 times more than it is of their white counterparts. The mechanics of mass incarceration include the war on drugs, zero tolerance policing, and sentencing guidelines like mandatory minimums and the 3-strike rule, which are things that are ineffective and not helping to rehabilitate persons who commit crime. Instead, it aids in turning them back to a life of crime due to them not being able to vote, get proper housing, or job to provide for themselves and their families. So, with that being said, what is the solution answer to mass incarceration? First, we have to acknowledge that there is a social economic disadvantage placed upon people of color, I being one of them. A form of systematic oppression and racism that prevents black men from being able to find and get jobs to provide for their families, resulting in a crime and a first-time offender being incarcerated for 30 years on a nonviolent crime, I being one of them. Schools in inner cities and low-income areas do not have the same advantages as schools in better areas. I did not graduate. I went to John B. Hood Middle School, James Madison High School. That says a lot. Solution to mass incarceration, education, jobs, and fair and equal legislation. Abolish mandatory minimums in the 3-strike rule. For first-time nonviolent offenders, they will be assigned a social worker, not a probation officer or parole officer, who will assess their needs and how to prevent them from re-entering the judicial system by finding them jobs, resources, and proper housing. They will have to complete a drug treatment program if they are a drug offender and do community service build up in the community, which they are disrupting. Business should work with offenders to give them employment instead of rejecting them. If they are not a first-time offender, they will have to go through mandatory job training and will be placed in a job at completion. Take some type of college courses or learn skilled trade and businesses. Organizations and corporations will be the ones to teach them how to do the job while they continue earning money to provide for themselves. They will have to do community service at local churches, boys and girls clubs, YMCAs, after-school programs, shelters, etc. I leave you with the same question Michelle Alexander asked in her book, The New Jim Crow. Where have our black men gone? My personal effort. Let me share my personal effort with you outside of what I do as far as my activism. I am currently the production supervisor at what is known as Distribution International, which is an insulation manufacturing company, actually a $1 million company, which I take great pride in being an employee of theirs. I supervise anywhere from 15 to 30 guys on a daily basis. I have employed at least 40 men. At least 40 men I have personally employed because I understand the need for money. I understand the need for employment. I understand the need to build yourself up. I understand the need to feel confident that you can make it out here. So that is my contribution towards preventing mass incarceration by giving individuals jobs, giving ex-felons jobs, giving them the opportunity. Not only do I supervise them, not only do I manage them, I cultivate them because that's what they need. I believe that you have to invest in people as opposed to investing in a process, because if you have the right people, they can work the process. So I believe once again that you have to invest in people, and you will get the results that we're looking for, that I'm looking for. Thanks for hearing me out.
Okay. Yeah, well, that was really awesome, and thank you, Jarvis, so much for sharing your amazing story and your success and your triumph. And this should be the rule, not the exception. And everything that he said, I want to say, yeah, that's exactly what we need. And that is, I think, you know, it's what we need to demand, and nothing less than that. When they say there's not enough money to do that, they mean there's not enough money for you, but there's plenty of money to conduct these regime change wars overseas. There's plenty of money to bail out Wall Street, $17 trillion and counting that we use to bail out the crooks who crashed our economy to start with. And $5 trillion, that's how much was passed under the Obama administration. $5 trillion in tax cuts for the wealthy, like making George Bush's tax cuts permanent or something like that. So I just want to start off by saying there's no reason on earth why everything that Jarvis called for shouldn't be the reality. And that's what we need to work for. And thank you for setting the bar and setting the record straight. Let's see. So I'm just going to say a couple of supporting remarks that really underscore what he said. And, you know, so my background, I am a medical doctor. I spent about 25 years in the clinic. And now I practice political medicine because it's the mother of all illnesses. And we got to fix this one in order to fix everything else that's literally killing us. Poverty, racism, pollution, environmental racism. We can fix that, you know, and the reasons we don't fix it is because we don't have a democracy. You know, we have a racist oligarchy is what we've got, you know, becoming like an aristocracy. And there is, let me say, there's a lot of people who are being thrown under the bus. And it's not only 1 out of every 3 African American men who are in prison on parole or probation. You know, it's 12 million immigrants who are threatened with deportation. It is 40 million young people who are in debt with no way out. 40 million young people. And that hurts the African American community more than anyone, because that debt falls hardest on the African American community. And young people who don't get the education are hurt the most, and that again is from the African American community. We know that among young people who don't have the ability to go on from high school are facing 50% unemployment rate, which is just sky high. And that's about twice as high as young white youth who don't go on to get education. So all of this over and over falls hardest on the Black community. So that's why, you know, Black Lives Matter matters, not only if you're Black, but it matters for everybody. Because if this kind of abuse can be heaped on our most vulnerable demographic, African Americans, then it can be heaped on everyone. So if we can make society work for African American community, we can make it work for everyone. And I want to give a big shout out of gratitude to what Black Lives Matter is doing by standing up and refusing to take no for an answer, and the incredible courage of the Black Lives Matter movement in the streets, in fighting these battles, you know, in hearings, in protests, in civil disobedience. I think it has really shown what it means to stand up and take our communities back. So, you know, a big thank you to Black Lives Matter for really fighting this fight for justice for everyone. And just a couple quick things. It's important to acknowledge, of course, that this fight against racism and against police violence, this is not a new problem, and I think everybody in this room knows this, that this is, in many ways, you know, it's the new Jim Crow, and there's a line that flows continuously from the criminal institution of slavery to lynchings when slavery was ended, to Jim Crow, to ongoing segregation, to the drug policies that were instituted in the 1950s that basically put people of color on the firing line and into jail. Those were racist drug policies from the start. You have the redlining of districts, which made it impossible for African American families to get loans in order to invest in housing and really own their neighborhoods. School policies, now it's called Every Child Succeeds Act, but before that, the No Child Left Behind. What did these do? You know, these created high stakes testing, and they targeted communities of color basically to close schools. To close schools. That was the policy from the Obama administration. And Arne Duncan, who just said he was going to retire, thank God, he should have retired like 8 years ago. You know, he's the head of Obama's education plan, along with Rahm Emanuel, who's the guy who took it to Chicago and made a mess out of Chicago schools. They were messed up to start with, because we've been cutting school budgets in order to give tax breaks to, you know, millionaires and billionaires. So this school policy is basically a policy of high stakes testing, which is not effective. You know, it's extremely counter-effective, especially for young people who have learning challenges and young people who are second language learners or are coming out of poverty. This is a horrible way to teach people. We should be teaching to the whole student, to the whole person, for lifelong learning, and not teaching to a test. And we should cancel those tests and stop judging students and stop judging teachers by those tests. This is just part of that long legacy of racism that flows from the institution of slavery on. And then, of course, environmental racism, what happened in Katrina and what happened in Sandy. We saw not only who got injured, but who didn't get rebuilt. It was the African American communities in New Orleans that didn't get rebuilt. And it was the African Americans, half of the African Americans who had to leave have not been able to come back because their housing didn't get rebuilt. Just all this, incredible racism that is not only in policing and in prisons and the courts, but it's in all areas of society, as Jarvis was saying. Under the last 4 years of the Obama administration, we saw the African American community take it on the chin. More than any other community, it was the African American community that got hit economically by the housing foreclosures and by the Wall Street crash. That's who got hit. So here's the numbers, just like put this in your pocket. If anybody ever questions that about economic racism, it is built into our economy, it's built into our culture. The same thing can be said about health and education and all the rest, but just take home this one little factoid. Before the Wall Street crash, the average African American family had 10 cents for every dollar that a white family had. 10 cents on the dollar. That's like just staggering. And over the course of the last 6 years, since the crash and the so-called recovery, what happened to that 10 cents on the dollar? You can imagine. It's now 5 cents on the dollar. So is it any wonder, that communities of color are exploding when they're being thrown under the bus the way that they are? And that's just the economy. That's just jobs. Add to that education. Healthcare. Let me give you a statistic that blew me away. We all know about health disparities. And you may have heard this outrageous statistic, that the average African American person, and it's worse for men, but the average African American person has 7 years taken off their lifespan compared to a white person just for being black. And if you add in the health effect